here at our new topic, in which we're going to be discussing the integumentary system. Integumentary system going to be formed by the skin and the skin appendages. So we're going to have an overview of the skin. We're going to see the different parts of the skin: epidermis, the dermis, and the hypodermis. We're going to discuss the appendages of the skin, which includes the sweat glands, sebaceous glands, and hair and nails. We're going to be studying the functions of the skin. You're going to have a brief overview of the three most common types of skin cancers, and we're going to have a brief overview of burns. First, the integument or the skin consists of three layers, which are the epidermis, dermis, and hypodermis. Epidermis, epi means on top of, so this is the most superficial layer of the skin. Deeper to it, we're going to have the dermis, which is the middle region, and the hypodermis is going to be the deepest region of the skin. Skin is representing 7% of the body weight. We have two main parts, the epidermis and the dermis. So we do not consider the hypodermis as part of the skin. We consider it below the skin. Epidermis gets replaced every 25 to 45 days. So every month, you actually going to be changing the epidermis. The epidermis that you didn't have last month is not the ones that you currently have because it changes over the time. If you remember, what is the type of tissues that builds up the epidermis? It's my stratified squamous epithelium, which is keratinized. And if you remember, when I have stratified squamous epithelium, what happens? Cells at the base are rapidly proliferating. They are pushing older cells to move upwards. And as they keep moving upwards, they shrink. So the cells will become flattened. If you remember why, because simply they don't get enough nutrients and oxygen by diffusion from the underlying areolar connective tissue. As those cells are moved away and away from the basement membrane, they shrink and then eventually gonna die. And the dead cells on here, their plasma membranes gonna be keratinized and they will form the keratin layer. What happens to the keratin layer? It gets removed and replaced by another layer of dead cells that will be formed because the epithelium will keep replicating, the epithelial cells will keep dividing. So this epidermis gonna be those cells here at the base gonna be getting older and they will die within 25 to 45 days. That's why the epidermis gets replaced each month. If we're looking at the layers of the epidermis, we've got the stratum basalis. Stratum means layer, and basalis means basal. So I have the basal cell layer on here at the base. Important cells that you can see in the stratum bisalis includes the melanocytes, and the melanocytes are the cells that are responsible to produce a pigment called melanin. The melanin itself is not located in the stratum bisalis. It's gonna be located in the next layer. You see those tiny dots on here. Those are the melanin granules, and they are located above in the next layer, which is my stratum spinosum. Other important cells that I can see on here, those are my Merkel cells, and the Merkel cells are located at the junction between the epidermis and the dermis. So all what we're looking at in here in this diagram is the epidermis. All those layers are my epidermal layers. So this is my keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. This is my keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. We're looking closer to the structure of those layers of the epithelium. We have stratum bisalis. Embedded between the basal cells, we've got the melanocytes, we've got the Merkel cells, which are responsible to detect sensations, cutaneous sensations. If we kept moving up, we go to stratum spinosum, and in the stratum spinosum, you can see those melanin granules that will be responsible to absorb the ultraviolet rays and will be reducing the risk of developing skin cancers. So the spectrum of light that you can see is red to violet. You cannot see infrared or ultraviolet. So if the wavelength of the light is beyond violet, ultraviolet, you can detect this by your eyes, but it still exists. It's a type of light. But this light is highly irritant. It can irritate the skin cells and can result in the development of skin cancers, because cancer usually develops due to irritation of the normal tissue. All right, so here as a protective measure in the skin, I have melanin granules. Those pigment granules, they will have the ability to capture those ultraviolet light rays, and those waves will be neutralized to not harm other internal tissues. So again, first layer is my stratum spinosum. First layer is my stratum basal, and next layer is my stratum spinosum, where I've got the melanin granules. Another very important cells that we see on here, located in the stratum spinosum, is going to be the Langerhans cell, and Langerhans cells are tissue macrophages. If you remember when we studied the cell membrane transport, we discussed the active membrane transports, and one of the types of active membrane transports that we've discussed was the vesicular transport. And if you remember, if I'm moving something inside the cells, this is endocytosis. If I'm moving out something outside of the cells, this is exocytosis. And a type of endocytosis that we've mentioned was phagocytosis, in which I am, as a cell, engulfing a solid structure. So I have something solid that I'm eating by the cell. So the cell is actually eating this solid structure. This is a phagocytosis. And located in your tissues, we have cells that will be carrying on the function of defending your tissues from bacterial cells. Those are called the macrophages. Phago is to eat, and macro means large. So those are the large eaters or the big eaters. Those cells are going to be widely distributed in your tissues, and we call them tissue macrophages. The tissue macrophage that we do have in the skin is called the Langerhans cell. Langerhans cell. Moving on top of the stratum spinosum, we have stratum granulosum. And stratum granulosum, from its name, it's formed of cells that contain cytoplasmic granules. We have two types of cytoplasmic granules within those cells. Those are my keratinohyaline granules and the lamellated granules. Keratohyaline granules, those are responsible to form the keratin that will be embedded in the plasma membranes of the dead cells in the next layer. And the lamellated granules, those will form a waterproof barrier against the passage of fluids to the inside of the skin. So if we're looking again on here, we've got stratum basal, stratum spinosum, and stratum granulosum. To the outside of the stratum granulosum, in all the skin parts, we've got the stratum corneum. And the stratum corneum is going to be formed of 20 to 30 layers of keratinized thick plasma membrane. So again, those are dead cells. What's remaining of those cells are just the plasma membranes that has been keratinized. And what I mean by keratinization of plasma membranes means I'm adding protein to those cell membranes, which will make them look like fibers and will make this thick fibrous layer on top of the skin for extra protection, as you remember. A layer that only exists in thick parts of the skin, like the palms, soles only. And so this is called the stratum lucidum, which is a clear layer. So stratum lucidum only exists in the palms and soles. And this is the reason why we do have thick skin in those parts of the body. So we're looking here at the different cells that we can see in the epidermis. We've seen the keratinocytes, and the keratinocytes, those are the cells responsible to produce the keratin, which is the fibrous protein. We've got the melanocytes, and those are spider-shaped cells that will be responsible for the formation of pigments that will be acting as shields from the ultraviolet light. And again, don't forget, where do I have the melanocytes? It's present in the stratum basal of my epidermis. Langerhans cells, they arise from the bone marrow, and they are macrophage responsible to activate the immune system. As we mentioned on here, those macrophages are the first line of defense against pathogens like bacteria trying to invade your body. So this is the very first line of defense that we've got in the skin in terms of immune cells. Merkel cells, those are sensory receptors for touch sensation, and they will be located, if you see on here, at the junction between the epidermis and the dermis. Merkel cells, those are located between the epidermis and the dermis. All right, so for Theodore, the lab exam is gonna have only one attempt. Only one attempt for the lab exam. And hypodermis, we didn't mention, no. Epidermis, you see on here, Merkel cells. All what we see on here, this is a very common mistake that a lot of people do. They think that we are looking at the whole thickness of the skin. Those 4 layers are only representing the epidermis, the outermost layer, the stratified squamous epithelium. All those are my stratified squamous epithelium altogether. Right? Stratum basal, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, and stratum corneum. All those are my keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. I'm not looking at the whole thickness of the skin. I'm looking at just the epidermis. And Merkel cells, as you see on here, Merkel cells are located at the junction between the epidermis and the dermis. And they are receptors, and they are touch receptors responsible to detect touch sensation in the skin. All right. Dermis is my next layer of the skin. This is going to be containing cells, fibroblasts, macrophages, mast cells, white blood cells. We have the matrix, which contains the 3 major types of connective tissue fibers. Those are my collagen fibers, elastic fibers, reticular fibers. Also embedded in the dermis, we can see for the first time blood vessels. If you remember, epidermis is epithelium, and epithelium is avascular. It doesn't contain any blood vessels, but here in the dermis, formed of connective tissue, it contains blood vessels, nerves, lymphatic vessels, hair follicles, and glands. So if we are looking at the dermis, what are the different types of connective tissues that we've discussed that are located in my dermis of the skin? Can you remind me of 2 different types of connective tissue located in the dermis of the skin? So seeing the epidermis did have keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. We've seen 2 different types of connective tissue within my dermis. And the hypodermis did contain the fat tissue, if you remember, adipose connective tissue. How about the connective tissues that are present in my dermis? So we've got 2 of them. Yes, first layer. What is the first layer? If I have a layer on here, what is the type of connective tissues that will be located just beneath the epithelium? Below epithelium, we've got areolar connective tissue. And yes, Alexandra, we've got deeper to the areolar connective tissue. Remember, I can pull on my skin in many directions, and I don't have rupture of the dermis. So what kind of tissue allowed you to exert tension in more than one direction? Exactly, it's the irregular, dense connective tissue. And remember, below my skin, in the hypodermis, I've got the adipose connective tissue. This is not part of the dermis. This is the hypodermis. Above in the skin, the outermost layer is going to be the epidermis. Yes, the adipose connective tissue is just in the hypodermis. So again, what are the two types of connective tissue building up my dermis? Those are my areolar connective tissue and the irregular dense connective tissue. This is again my dermis. And those are, you see on here, forming two layers. I have the outer layer, which is a thin superficial layer that will be located below the epidermis. This is gonna be formed of areolar connective tissue. And the major characteristic here of this layer, called the papillary layer, is that it has papillae. Those elevations, those are called my dermal papillae. Dermal papillae are formed because of the distribution of the nerve endings, as you see on here, and blood vessels. And those are going to be responsible for the appearance of the fingerprints. So those are going to be reflected to the outside on the epidermis to give you those ridges of your fingerprints. What do you think is the function of fingerprints? Why do we have fingerprints? Why do you think you have fingerprints? Why it's not a smooth skin? Sensation. But I will still have the receptors for sensations if it was so smooth without any ridges. What do you think? It enhances the grip. So try to imagine that you don't have any ridges on your skin, on the epidermis, and you are holding something, it's more likely to slip out of from your hand. All right, so it enhances the grip. So again, why do we have those fingerprint ridges? Those gonna be enhancing the grip. So what's inside the papillary dermal papillae is gonna be pain receptors, Meissner's corpuscles responsible for touch. See on here, those are located inside my papillary layer of my dermis. Reticular layers is going to be located deeper to the papillary layer, and it's representing 80% of the thickness of my dermis. It's formed of the dense irregular connective tissue, and as you remember, I have mainly formed of collagen fibers, and to less extent I have elastic fiber in it. So looking here at the different layers of the skin, we've got the epidermis with all its 4 layers, again, stratum basal, stratum spinosum, stratum granulosum, and to the outside of it we have stratum corneum. Deeper to the epidermis, we've got the dermis, which is formed of 2 layers, the papillary layer and the reticular layer. Papillary layer is only representing a small part of the epidermis. It's going to contain the dermal papillae, which is going to be containing the nerve fibers on here and the blood vessels, and they will be responsible for the appearance of the fingerprint ridges on your skin. Deeper to the papillary layer, we've got the reticular layer, and the reticular layer is going to be again full of dense, irregular connective tissue, and you're going to see a lot of skin appendages that are going to be located in here, like the hair with the hair follicle, the glands that are associated to the hair follicle. Those are my sebaceous glands or oil glands. You'll see that the hair follicle is going to be attached by a muscle on here. This is called my erector pili muscle, and erector pili muscle simply means the muscle responsible for the erection of the pilus. Pilus is the hair, so the muscle contraction here gonna result in erection of the hair, and those are the ones that will be responsible for the goose skin that a person might get, the contraction of the erector pili muscles. Other things that you can see on here, we can see the sweat glands or the eccrine glands. So if we're looking first at the sebaceous gland, sebaceous glands are going to be responsible for the secretion of the oil that will be covering the hair shaft and the outer layer of the skin. And this will keep the hair and skin soft and moistened. What do you think is the skin problem that is associated with the sebaceous glands? That is very common, related to puberty. You're gonna have like an aisle in any of the pharmacies. Acne. So how acne develops? So see on here, if I have dirt or whatever things that blocks the outflow of the sebaceous secretion out from the hair follicle to the surface of the skin, what's going to happen? This oil is going to be accumulating within the hair follicle. And whenever I have stasis, there is no movement of this oil, this fat. This is fat. So who's going to be in love with this fat that you are accumulating and it can't get out? Bacteria. So the bacteria will start to break down this fat and will form clusters and colonies and will cause the infection within the hair follicle. So why is it common in children during puberty? During puberty, because of the sudden rise of the sex hormones, one of the things that will be affected is going to be the oil secretions released from the sebaceous glands. So now the oil secretions will become thicker and it will become more difficult for the sebaceous secretions to move out of my hair follicle to the skin surface. So as they accumulate, they will start to cause the infection within the hair follicle. That's why it's common during puberty. Having a look on here at the skin color, we have three major pigments that will normally be determining the skin color. The first one is the melanin. Again, when did I have the melanin granules? Can you remind me? In what layer of the skin did I have melanin granules? Stratum, see on here, stratum spinosum, spinosum, all right? The stratum granulosum did have two other types of granules. Those were my keratohyalin granules and the lamellated granules. So again, you see on here, melanin granules are located in stratum spinosum, and they are produced from the melanocytes located in the stratum basal. All right, so again, where do I keep the melanin granules? In the stratum spinosum. So the melanin is going to be responsible for the yellow to reddish brown to black skin color. This is a type of pigment, skin pigment, that would be responsible for dark skin colors. So the more melanin I have, the higher the concentration of melanin I have in my skin, the darker my skin color would be. Another pigment that is going to be playing a role in determining the skin color is going to be the carotene. And carotene is going to be yellow to orange, most obvious in the palms, because in the palms and soles, because simply I don't have melanin, much melanin in here, in those sites. That's why carotene is going to be manifested at those sites more than the sites that contain already a darker pigment like the melanin. Something to remind you of the carotenes, that the carotene is one of the pigments that contribute in skin color. So when I was in grade 6 maybe, or grade 5, I was watching a TV show. I'm pretty sure that a lot of you are familiar with, which is the Magic School Bus. And in one of those episodes of the show, the kid in the show did eat a lot of carrots, so his skin color did change into orange, his hair color did change into orange. So I decided to do the same, and I grabbed lots of carrots and I kept eating them all day long. I ended up having a stomach ache, and I didn't have any change in my skin color or hair color, right? So this is just to remind you, this is story just to remind you that carotene is one of the three major pigments that will be contributing to skin color. All right. So how many of you did watch the show during childhood? All right. So I'm not the only one. Great. Do you remember this episode where the kid was eating carrots and he changed his skin color and hair color? Do you remember this? Yeah. All right. Yeah. I remember they did have like the bus shrinks and moves within the blood where they can find the color. All right, it was fun. It was fun. All right. So again, one of the three pigments that we've got that will be affecting. So actually, it doesn't happen. It's you need a huge amounts of carotene, and so I told you I ate like that day I ate like 30 pounds maybe carrots over the day. I ended up in the hospital with stomach pain, and nothing have changed and nothing has affected skin color. You need huge amounts, not only by just ingesting. All right, carotene is present normally in your skin. This is a normal pigment that is present in your skin. All right. All right, does this answer your question here? Yeah, it needs a huge amounts. Like he has to be ingesting huge amounts on daily basis for many months in order for him to have a very slight change of the skin color. But theoretically, yes, it can happen, but you need huge amounts. You need huge amounts and a long period of time. And the change is not that big. All right. Hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the pigment responsible for carrying the oxygen within your red blood cells. And the hemoglobin is going to be responsible for the pinkish color of the skin. So if a person has anemia, what is the first thing that you're going to notice? That he has pallor. He's pale. Why he's pale? Because simply he has less red blood cells circulating, or he has smaller amounts of hemoglobin in his red blood cells, and as a result, what do you think? You'll see loss of this pinkish color of the skin, this reddish color of the skin. Other skin colors that will have clinical importance, like the yellowish skin color of the skin, or what we call jaundice. So when we break down the red blood cells are enucleated. If you remember, when we've seen the red blood cells under the microscope, how did they look like? They did have dark peripheral part and pale center. They are biconcave discs which are enucleated. They don't have a nucleus. So those cells can't actually divide. They cannot replicate. Those are corpuscles filled with hemoglobin. And their main function is going to be to deliver oxygen to the various parts of the body. Those red blood cells will be surviving in the bloodstream for 100 to 120 days. After that, they will be broken down, and the hemoglobin is going to be divided into heme group and globin chain. And the heme part is going to be broken down. I would be extracting the iron from it, and the remaining part of the heme is going to be the bilirubin. And the bilirubin is going to be the pigment, the yellowish pigment that will be released out in the body. The organs that is responsible to pick up the bilirubin and conjugate it for it to be released within the bile is going to be the liver. So two main homeostatic imbalances, or two sets of homeostatic imbalances, can result in jaundice, yellowish discoloration of the skin. If I have destruction of red blood cells at a very high pace, I have what I call hemolytic anemia, for example. I have over destruction of the red blood cells. So I'm producing huge amounts of bilirubin that exceeds the ability of the liver to pick up and conjugate At this time, the bilirubin gonna rise in the blood, and it's gonna be manifested as this yellowish discoloration of the skin. Or a person might have liver problems like liver cirrhosis. If a person has liver cirrhosis, his liver cells can't pick this bilirubin and get it conjugated, so it's going to remain high in his bloodstream. Also, this is going to result in jaundice or the yellowish discoloration of the skin. Other abnormal skin colors can be like the cyanosis, and this is the bluish discoloration of skin. So I have blue skin. So this is due to the accumulation of the dark red colored blood, and the dark red colored blood is a deoxygenated blood. I have deoxygenated blood circulating now to be delivered or is delivered to my systemic organs. This what will result in the cyanos or the bluish discoloration of the skin. What might cause the bluish discoloration of the skin if a person has, for example, a congenital anomaly in the heart? So rather than have a disease which is very rare, called the tetralogy of Pallet, where the aorta is going to be actually carrying the blood from the right side of the heart instead of only the left side of the heart. So if we're looking here, here I have oxygenated blood, here I have deoxygenated blood. So the aorta will be overriding, means it's going to be able to get blood, to receive blood from both sides of the heart, from both right and left sides of the heart. So this will result in deoxygenated blood being delivered to my aorta. And as a result, this deoxygenated blood gonna be manifested as bluish discoloration of skin. All right. Questions? All right, so we can have a break for 10. We come back, discuss the skin appendages. Before we go for a break, I want, some of you were requesting here the video recordings because they have missed parts of the class or they have missed the class. So let me give you this YouTube channel on which that I'm using to upload the video recordings. Video recordings are usually getting uploaded on this YouTube channel. On the weekend. So for today's meeting, it won't be available on this YouTube channel until the until this weekend, until Friday or Saturday of this week. All right, so if you've missed a class on a day, or you were not able to focus in one of those meetings, please keep this in your records. I've sent it in the chatting box in uh, in the Zoom meeting on here. So please keep it in your records for you to access whenever you need. If you've missed a class, or you've missed part of the meeting, or you weren't able to focus in part of the meeting. So please keep this link in your records and check it out whenever you need. All right. All right, so we can go for a break. We'll see you in 10 minutes. No, we don't have 2 attempts. We have only 1 attempt for the lecture exam and only 1 attempt for the lab exam. All right. We only have 1 attempt for the lab, 1 attempt for the lecture exam. We don't have more than 1 attempt for the lab. All right. Rhea, did you hear this? All right.